So what makes a scary story really get under your skin? It's rarely about the jump scares, right? It's the atmosphere. It's that slow burn tension. And in this breakdown, we're going to deconstruct an animated horror story to see exactly how it uses every single tool in the animator's toolbox to turn one person's terrifying encounter into a nightmare that feels like it could happen to any of us. Let's get into it.
Just imagine that for a second. That brief moment you thought you were safe, completely shattered. This is the heart-stopping peak of our story. But the real magic, the real horror, is how we get here. So let's hit rewind and see how the story and the animation work hand in hand to build up to this moment of pure, uncut panic.
You know, every great suspense story, it always starts with the setting. It's the foundation for fear. And for an animator, especially in 3D, the setting is basically another character. They can control everything. The harsh glow of a single streetlight, how thick the snow is falling, that echoing silence, all of it to build this very specific, very uncomfortable mood of total isolation.
Okay, look at this setup. Every detail here is like an ingredient in a recipe for vulnerability. You're 17, so you're kind of on that edge of being an adult, but you're still exposed. It's late on a Sunday night, so the world has gone quiet. The bus shelter itself, it's just a glass box on a deserted stage. And then the snow starts. It doesn't just make things cold, it deadens all the sound, creating this eerie quiet where every little noise feels like a huge threat. The whole scene is just designed to make our main character feel completely, utterly alone.
So, into this perfectly crafted bubble of isolation steps our antagonist. And this is where 3D animation gets really effective. Before anyone even says a word, an animator can signal that something is off. They can design a walk cycle that's just a little too slow, a little too heavy. They can rig the 3D model's posture so it's just subtly wrong, or maybe add a tiny, almost invisible tremor to his hands. It sets you on edge before you even know why.
And there it is, that slow walk. It's not aggressive, not yet anyway. It's methodical. The thick clothes hide his form, so he's just this unknown shape. And that slow, deliberate pace is way more terrifying than if he just sprinted at you, because it feels calculated. It gives your brain way too much time to imagine all the horrible things that might happen next.
And then we get the first contact. It's not a threat, it's not a demand for money, it's just weird. This question, what does the boss do, is the exact moment that any hope for a normal situation just evaporates. It confirms all our worst feelings. Something is deeply, fundamentally wrong here.
All right, now things start to escalate. This next sequence is just a masterclass in building tension by slowly and deliberately violating one of our most basic human boundaries, our personal space.
This whole progression is just brilliantly terrifying. First, he enters the space, okay. Then the stare, relentless, unblinking. Then he physically moves closer. And finally, you get that horrible, intimate sound of him sliding across the bench. Each step is a purposeful escalation. In an animation, you can time each of these actions perfectly, maybe holding the shot for just a beat too long to really ramp up that discomfort, making that bus shelter feel smaller and smaller until it feels like a trap.
Now this detail right here is so important. Glossy eyes. That's such a powerful visual. For a 3D animator, that's all about adjusting the light reflection, the specular highlights, on the character's eyes to make them look lifeless, unfocused. It's a trick to make them look inhuman, totally vacant. It's the visual proof that this person is not on the same wavelength as you. And then, he leans in.
And that's the breaking point. The boundary has been completely crossed, and the flight response just takes over. All that psychological tension that's been winding up for the last few minutes finally snaps into physical action. The creepy mind game is over. Now it's a chase.
I mean, this is a primal fear, isn't it? The terror of being chased. The only sounds are your own feet hitting the pavement and your heart pounding in your chest. And you have this overwhelming urge to not look back because you were terrified of what you might see gaining on you.
So our protagonist finds a new safe spot, another glass box, and for a second, you feel that relief. You can finally take a breath. You think you've escaped. And this, of course, is a classic horror move. Give the character, and us, a moment of false hope right before delivering the final blow.
And here we are. The climax. All that tension, all that running, all that fear has led right to this moment. There is nowhere left to go.
And for the very first time, our protagonist actually fights back. Yeah, his voice is shaking, it's full of fear, but there's defiance in there too. It's this desperate last-ditch effort to take back some control, to push back against this person who's been terrorizing him.
And boom, it's over. And what's so brilliant about this is how chaotic and messy it is. It's not some big choreographed fight, it's just a sudden, clumsy lunge and an abrupt, violent collapse. You can just picture the animation, that explosive burst of energy, and then the limp, sickening thud as he hits the ground. It's a shocking, brutal end to the chase. But the story doesn't end there. Not even close. In fact, the horror is about to morph into something else entirely. Something way more complicated and honestly heartbreaking. This is the reveal.
And just like that, with a few cold, hard facts from a police report, the entire story just flips on its head. The monster is gone. That creepy, mindless attacker just vanishes. And in his place, there's a person. A person completely broken by grief, his mind twisted by medication.
This right here shows the incredible disconnect. What our narrator experienced as a terrifying, life-threatening attack was, from the other guy's perspective, a tragic, confused attempt to reconnect with a son he had lost. The story forces us to hold both of these truths at the same time. The fear was 100% real, and the tragedy was 100% real. They don't cancel each other out. And this is the aftermath. 0. Understanding the man's tragic story doesn't magically erase the trauma. The terror he felt was real, and it left a permanent scar. This single number says more about the lasting psychological damage than an entire paragraph could.
Now for us, the audience, finding out the truth provides a kind of catharsis, right? The horror tension is released, and it's replaced by this deep sadness. But it's so important to remember that for the narrator, the person who lived it, there is no relief. He's just left with the memory of that fear, a fear that was very, very real. And with that, the stranger's story comes to this quiet, somber end. He wasn't a monster who was defeated. He was a suffering human being who was taken away to get help. It's just a profoundly sad and human conclusion.
So we're left with this question: how can animation make us feel a story like this so intensely? Well, by carefully building a world, by controlling every single unsettling movement, by rendering a character's eyes to look glossy and empty, 3D animation can create pure, focused terror. But then, by revealing the human tragedy behind that terror, it uses that exact same power of focus to create enormous empathy. It just bypasses our rational brains and plugs directly into our emotions, making us feel a stranger's horror and his heartbreak as if they were our own.